Board stories, gente. That's how we do it. The whole story. From the beach to the water. The mind, the factory.
Oh yeah. That's the kind of board I'm surfing today, kind of. And then the other thing, when you see these channels like this, they look all crazy and super deep, but actually one thing you really have to keep in mind when you're shaping is it's gonna, when you glass it, literally like 30% of the channels are gonna disappear. 20 to 30%, so it's gonna be way, way less deep. So it's always better to exaggerate the depth of channels or concaves or whatever, because if not, they're gonna disappear during the glassing. If you can barely see it, it's literally, you won't even feel it. And I think that if you're gonna put some kind of bottom contour or channel on a board, you should really see it and feel it a lot, because if not, it's really not gonna have that much effect. So if you're putting channels on a board to have XYZ effect, exaggerate the depth and all that to really emphasize that X, Y, or Z effect. Keeping in mind that when you glass it, 20 or 30% of it's gonna disappear in your glass process because it's filling in with resin. Here the idea, basically if you make channels look really cool, you have to imagine the water flowing down the board. And it almost always works at every board I made, is you just imagine the water flowing down the board really fast, and it's a rocket, and it always works. I've made, actually all the boards I made that had these crazy channels, they all work, honestly. And it's super fun to shape. I really like, and they look cool, and they go really fast. And they're super loose as well, but in a good way. It has to be fun to ride. So maybe like there's a design that performs better and this and that, but it's not gonna be as fun. I prefer going with like the fun design.
Fun number one.
Fun's the most important thing. And like as far as channels, everybody's like talking, yeah, the channels and it does this. It doesn't, it creates air under the board. It's complete bullshit. It doesn't do that at all. On a boat that has a planing hull, you're going so fast that it might do that. You'll have like, you'll be skimming on top of the water. It's not really creating air, but it's creating like reverse lift, kind of. But on a board, there's no way you attain speeds that fast. First of all, you don't attain speeds that fast to be able to create enough air under the board that would make any difference at all in your lift, if it even does that at all. And second of all, you're never going straight. So when you're going down the face of the wave, you're going straight on, on water that's moving completely sideways. Then you turn, so basically the water's never going straight under the board. So that, theory of like, you're gonna create lift on the board is bullshit. I think it's complete bullshit. I think what it does is like, let's say this blank, I'm just gonna give this particular one is 21.5 wide. Right? So if you measure from here to here and if it was completely flat, it would be 21.5. Suddenly I add like a really deep single concave, and the surface area, instead of being 21.5, if you actually put the tape like this and measure the whole thing, it would probably be like 23. So what you're doing is you're increasing the surface area underneath the board, and the wave is not, the water moving in the wave is full of kinetic energy, even if you don't move on the wave. So what it's doing is putting even more, of that energy in contact with the board, and that may or may not work depending on how you make the channels. Maybe it just adds drag and it sucks. But if you do it in a correct combination, it actually increases the surface area and increases how much of the board is in contact with the energy of the wave, and that'll make you go way faster. So this is a classic combination as far as like the single concave to the double. We know that works, and we know that works because a million people have tried it before me. And I've tried boards like this, and like I make board, we'll see the other board with the crazy channels, and I've tried it, so I know it works. But really and truly, all these shapers are, and this and all these hydrodynamic theories, it's complete bullshit. I think they know really exactly what works for who, when, and where, and what kind of board, because they've tried it and they know it works. But all these like scientific hydrodynamic theories are complete bullshit. When it comes to surfing, there's too many variables to have like some kind of, you can't take boats as an example, for example, boats or windsurf boards or kiteboard, because they're just going straight all the time. So yeah, there, if you put this and that, it could be a constant, but there's no constant in surfing. I think shapers just know, because they've done so many boards with this and that, and this kind of board and that kind of board and that point break and that beach break, so they know what works and what doesn't work, but they don't exactly know why. Not 100% sure what I'm saying, but I really think that, for example, when you take a longboard out, like for example today, there's like super gutless waves. If you take a shortboard out, it's not going to work at all. It's going to be like a real struggle. You take a longboard, it's like boom, boom, one paddle, you're in the wave. And the reason why is because the longboard has way more surface area in contact with the wave. So the slightest bit of energy, like a wave this big, the longboard's going to surf it all the way, without any problem at all. And you're going to catch, you paddle with the longboard, you catch the wave way earlier. And that's not because like the longboard is faster or it's heavier. It's just because there's like double the surface area in contact with the same amount of wave as you would with a shortboard. So you're going to go like that. And that's surface area. That has nothing to do with like the bottom point. Depending on the design, because like, you could also just be adding drag.
Right.
If you make channels or bottom contour that sucks, you're going to increase the surface area without taking advantage of the energy of the wave, and you're just going to add drag, which would suck also. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, so I've got a question for you. Of all the elements that go into a high performance shortboard, what people want in a board, and when they go to their shaper and they order it, what is the most slept on aspect of surfboard design?
Well, first of all, before I even start, the two people you should never lie to is your lawyer and your shaper. When you go see a shaper, don't start acting like you surf way better than you do in the snap, because he's going to make you a board that's not going to work for you. So you have to be honest with your level of surfing, and then the guy's going to make a board that's going to be adapted for your level of surfing. And I think the most overlooked thing is thickness. That is the number one thing. I think everybody orders boards that are way too thin, myself included. I used to do that a lot in the 80s and 90s. I had Richie Collins's board that I bought from him in Lacado, and it was like a thing that was way too, it did not work for me. I made it work because I was like, yeah, it's Richie Collins's board. And for years and years and years, everybody was thinking completely wrongfully that if a board thickness had anything to do with maneuverability, it had nothing to do with maneuverability. Thickness just has to do with how floaty the board is. It has nothing to do with maneuverability. And we all thought that if you have a board that's too thick, it's not going to be maneuverable. It's complete bullshit. So for years and years, our surfing boards are way too thin. And I think the most overlooked aspect in when people order boards today is they always order boards. Well, not always, but mostly order boards that are too thin, and they order boards for 10% of the time. So you have anywhere in the world, except places where it's always really good, the waves are always going to be smaller, like chest high or below, 80% of the time. And 95% of the people are riding boards that are designed to work for that other 15% of the time when it's head high and above, and that's retarded. So you should order a fish or like a short board that's really thick and all that, designed to work when it's really small and mushy. And then on those days when it's big, you can make that work much better than you can do the opposite. Basically, in my opinion, when you're going on the wave, you're using the kinetic energy of the wave. The wave is moving, so all that water that hits the reef is actually moving. And kinetic energy is like the force of movement, the energy of movement, basically. And you just tap into that by, using various designs or whatever. So like super big, super hollow wave has a lot of energy, a shitload of kinetic energy. So then you can surf completely different kinds of boards. And actually the design matters a little bit less. It's less sensitive to is it going to work or not, because the wave is so powerful that pretty much anything works really. Then it's just a question of is it stable or not, more than anything else. But when it's small and mushy, there is super important. The slightest mistake, you lose the waves. There's much less energy. The slightest design flaw in the board or the wrong fins, this and that. The slight, for example, you were saying about the leash drag, for example, that's super important. It's going to add 5-10% of drag because the leash is too big or whatever. You've got a piece of seaweed, and since the wave is lacking energy and is really small, that's going to completely fuck you up and you're going to miss the wave. So it's super important. And also generating speed in mushy waves and gutless waves is super hard compared to generating speed in big waves. Generating speed in big waves is super easy. You just go and you just generate the speed. It's there, it's a given. But in small waves that don't have a lot of energy, it's hard. You really have to be smooth and all that, so you need boards that really adapt to that kind of wave. So here's, I always make the Y point on my board about 2 inches forward, sometimes more. And the reason why is because when you're on the board like this, the board's right here, you're always your front foot and the momentum is always way past the midpoint of the board. So in my opinion, if you get the most thickness, that's where it's the most important, because that's where you're going to be pushing. And if you have the most thickness, you have a lot of floatability in that particular place and buoyancy, and you're going to get going really fast. So on these particular boards, I do that beveled rails thing, which is kind of semi-displacement, semi-not. So your chest would be here, right? And then you're paddling, and then you know how you go like that with your chest, and boom, all of a sudden it sucks you into the wave. You catch the waves like that, which I think is super important. And then one mega important aspect of a board, I think, is get up and go speed. It's in that first second of the wave. If you get that perfect get up and go speed, okay, that's it. You made the wave all the way to the end. If you fuck that up, well, the board is not doesn't have that get up and go speed. It's going to be much harder to get in momentum with the wave. Because if you take off and you fuck up the takeoff and the get up and go moment, you can catch the wave and get it, but it's not going to be the same as if you're in sync right from the beginning, get up and go, boom, you go right away. So the wave is so that's mega important. So that's why I make the Y point way forward. And here it has the super deep singlet concave, and then the kind of makes a wing shape a little bit, and that basically sucks you into the wave, gives it a lot of stability, and you have that get up and go speed immediately, and it's super stable. It adds stability to the board for some reason. I'm not really sure why, but it does. So I make them all like that. And so on top, basically, so you could make it go like this, but you never like the first 3 inches of a board, you never used it really. Like it's kind of like you could cut off the nose of every board, and it would make no difference at all. However, it does make difference. Like you're taking weight off the front, which is like the worst part to have weight on a board really, truly. And also, if you make the front go up like this part here goes up, you're not going to stick the nose of the board everywhere because it's really thick, and it also has like a little shape that goes up. So here's basically like a little bit different adaptation of the same channels. I think this is going to work really well as well. And it's also a super small board. And again, it has like, the single concave here with the beveled rails going out. And also the other thing, the advantage of making a board that's a little bit more square in the nose is you don't have to pull in the front so much. Because let's say it would come out to here, I would actually have to pull in the design and it would go more like that, you know what I mean? And then you're losing all this surface area here, which is super important. So if you make the board square in front, actually you have more surface area to work with in front of the board when you're going like this, you mean? As opposed to like, and here is where you're gonna, here is like the middle, is where you're gonna put the foot roughly. So this is where you're gonna be pushing off on, so the weight is distributed like I think roughly here. And if it's wider here, I noticed that, for example, I have a Ryan Burst fish, which is a super good board, but it's like way more pulled in. And right away I noticed a mega difference as far as pumping. It doesn't go as good in super small ways as these did. It would work better in bigger ways, it's a little bit more pulled in design, but you can tell right away. So that's why I make the nose go out like that a lot, because you can flip a lot more and go way faster. In super small ways, like today, for example, this kind of thing works way better, for sure. Alan is totally hating me for the glassing and sanding. It's much more, really, really hard to sand. Glassing's not such a big deal, but the sanding part is like a pretty big deal. Like it's a lot more work. But for example, you can see here, these channels were like deeper than the ones on the previous board. And 30% of the channel, 20-30% of the channel disappears in the glassing process because you have the glass on it, the resin and everything. So if you want the channels to really show up a lot, you really have to exaggerate them a lot.
Word. This thing's gonna fly.
Yeah, there's another one I'm gonna have to sell because they're almost giving me shit all the time. So.
Sexy curves. Yeah, man, I can't wait to try this thing. A little minty fresh, rocket.
It's gonna work super good for sure, I think.
Same.
The other thing with these kind of boards that I find is I use 6 ounce, I glass with 6 ounce, and actually make them kind of heavy. So one thing I noticed is, for example, the purple board today, I glassed it on purpose with 2 6 ounces on top, 1 on the bottom, so it's really heavy. You get a lot more speed and momentum with a heavy board because of the inertia, and it really makes a big difference, especially in small ways. So so obviously, like if some dude wants to do airs, which I never do airs, I don't know how to do airs. So obviously in that case, that would be a disadvantage. But other than that, it's a mega advantage to have a board that's heavy because you surf with them. You use the inertia of the board to actually gain speed and then do like a snap or whatever, boom, boom, and right away. So it takes a tiny bit more effort on your part to like get that inertia going. But once it gets going, boom, it's like.
Then you have swing weight behind you that
exactly.
propels you.
Yeah. So once you've actually made that initial pump more because it's heavy, then suddenly all of a sudden, boom, that's it. It's effortless. So I think it's a big advantage.
Totally.
So that's why I glass all these boards a little bit heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've done both. I've done like super ultralight and then heavy glassing and try it out. And every time it's been better with a little bit heavier glass. Basically, in my opinion, basically when you're going on the wave, you're using the kinetic energy of the wave. The wave is moving, so all that water that hits the reef is actually moving. And kinetic energy is like the force of movement, the energy of movement, basically. And you just tap into that by, using various designs or whatever. So like super big, super hollow wave has a lot of energy, a shitload of kinetic energy. So then you can surf completely different kinds of boards. And actually the design matters a little bit less. It's less sensitive to like, is it going to work or not? Because the wave is so powerful that pretty much anything works really. Then it's just a question of like, is it stable or not, more than anything else. But when it's small and mushy, there is super important. The slightest mistake, you lose the waves. There's much less energy. You know, the slightest design flaw in the board or the wrong fins, this and that. The slightest, like for example, you were saying about the leash drag. For example, that's super important. It's going to add like 5-10% of drag because the leash is too big or whatever. You've got a piece of seaweed, and since the wave is lacking energy and is really small, that's going to completely fuck you up and you're going to miss the wave. So it's super important. And also generating speed in mushy waves and gutless waves is super hard compared to generating speed in big waves. Generating speed in big waves is super easy. You just go and you just generate the speed. Like it's there, it's a given. But in small waves that don't have a lot of energy, it's hard. You really have to be smooth and all that. So you need boards that really adapt to that kind of wave.
Look at this, people. Got an asymmetric fish, 3 fins, but not 3 fins how you'd normally see them. Look at that concave. Those rails. Deck. How long is it?
5 up, yeah. And it's super loose, but it doesn't do anything weird. Like you wouldn't even notice it's asymmetric if you're just like, if all of a sudden you're just riding it. It just feels like super drivey front side and real loose back side. So it's cool. It's mega controlled. So it's good. Yeah, for these waves now it'd be perfect.
What's the theory with the channels and the tail?
Basically the tail, you want the toe side. You want the toe side to be slightly longer, the rail, because you have a lot more drive and you have a lot more control on the toes. So that's where you get all your drive. And backside you have a little bit less control and less leverage basically, so to speak, on your heel. So you want the rail to be a little bit shorter, so that it's looser. And I made the channel in the middle, basically it's the same on both sides. The channel runs down the middle. And that just adds a little bit of drive and speed and also stability. It's like it's a super small board. And I made the rails real hard. I mean, I like really hard rails, so. And there's like a little bit of chine in the rail in front, basically, so it avoids you sticking curling at any point. Yeah, like you can push it super hard, where normally you'd stick the nose, it kind of slides out in a controlled way. And it also helps you when you're paddling the cash away, it kind of sucks it away. That's cool. I think you're gonna like it.
So back tail is so wide. Do I need to move my foot? Like when I bottom turn here and then move it here?
No, just surf normal.
Just leave it in the middle.
Yeah, just surf it totally normal. You don't have to do anything different.
Okay, see if I can get it on rail. Epic. Board stories, gente. This is how we do it. The whole story. From the beach to the water. The mind to the factory. Beautiful board, huh?
Yes.
Oh, it's tiny.
Yes, it is. But it's
Thick.
wide.
Yeah, it's wide and thick.
Yes.
Board stories. Hola.